Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. So do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, and of course, upvote the video if you can, and comment as well. Join our Subtext community as well. Whenever we have some little bit of information, we'll put it on there. If not, you might get early access to videos like you did with Damon Williams last week. Anyway, Pratt Rogers is here for his weekly segment. How we doing, Pratt?
Doing great, Steven. Hard to complain. Beautiful day here in Memphis. Not a cloud in the sky. You can kind of see behind me, but anyway, beautiful day.
Yeah, and that's always the case. Now, most of the time down here, it is a beautiful day. So sunny days, we don't think very much about them. We actually want rain from time to time.
You call sunny days, right?
Yes. It is the Sunshine State. I mean, it's not like it's even overly bragging at that point. It's like sun 300 days of the year.
That's pretty awesome. Very jealous of that.
Well, anyway, Ole Miss had a crawfish boil. We don't know much information on what came out of it, but it was interesting that they got people together for a visit weekend. 3 5-stars were apparently on campus. Caleb Odom was on the campus, apparently. And I guess this is the equivalent of Juice Fest. I mean, I know you haven't heard much about it, but what do you think about these unofficial recruiting hangout weekends?
I love it. And, I didn't even think about that. That's a great equivalent to Juice Fest. Kind of just my understanding, kind of a hangout. And get a chance to really get some face time with position coaches, stuff like that. A lot of these, like you mentioned, kind of 5-star blue chip guys, they've been in Oxford 100 times. They know everybody in the country wants them. This is nothing new. It's just extra face time with the coaches. It's extra chance for us to sit down and tell you how meaningful you are to our program and how bad we want you to play. I doubt they really even go into like specifics of positions and stuff like that on a kind of casual weekend like this, but maybe talk shop a little bit, stuff like that. But it's super exciting, the amount of people that were even getting to come to these things, because that's telling you the interest is there from a lot of these high-end prospects.
Well, what they were talking about when they were here was the NFL draft, and Jonathan Mingo had a pretty good day for Ole Miss. Now, the last 3 number ones on Ole Miss's football team, that would be Jonathan Mingo, A.J. Brown, and Laquan Treadwell, have either gone in the first or second round. So I imagine that was probably a talking point. Probably not if Randall Mackey maybe was in town, but if you're a wide receiver thinking about Ole Miss, that probably was a talking point, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, the thing is, they're telling every single one of these kids, is whether it's Jamonta Waller or Kamarion Franklin or Caleb Odom, all these guys we've been talking about for weeks on end, the first thing they're saying to these guys is, hey, look, we are putting people in the NFL. This can be you. Come to the SIP, quote unquote, and that's what Lane Kiffin's building a brand on. I was excited to see Mingo kind of shoot up. I know we had talked about that maybe last time we caught up, and I think we both kind of pegged him as a late second rounder, and that seemingly right where he landed.
Yeah, and, we thought the first 2 picks probably would have been Mingo and then Zach Evans, but Zach Evans actually did fall a good bit in the draft, and he almost got taken in the 7th round. But the 3rd round, I believe they took Tavius Robinson. That's where he went. He went to Baltimore.
Yep.
He's a good, strong side defensive end, in my opinion, for the NFL.
Yep, and Baltimore just always has like that defensive-minded team, I feel like. Going back to the Terrell Suggs days or Ray Lewis, I just feel like being a defensive guy, I feel like that's just an automatic great fit for him at the Ravens. So that'll be super cool to see. You mentioned Evans kind of slipping. I feel like everybody, it was kind of like the worst kept secret of the draft, that everybody felt like, maybe you stay a year, when his evaluation seemingly didn't come back, that he would be, a top 3 round pick. And that's kind of what happened is, he ended up, where was he? Fifth, sixth round, something like that. I've
Yeah,
forgotten, but
just better. I think in the compensatory picks for the 6th round, so right before the
yeah,
second.
man, yeah, you just never ever think coming out of high school, the number one overall prospect would end up falling that low. But I think he's going to, and it's all health related. We all know that. But I think he's going to end up being a great back for somebody. I'm excited to see him. I hope he gets some good playing time and, lands on, makes a career in the NFL.
Yeah. I think it's good. I think Mike Espy reached out to me yesterday and let me know, it's like, hey, this is a good spot for Zach Evans. It makes sense. And I am not questioning the fit or anything after the decision to go pro. I just think he could have maximized this contract by coming back for another year and going in next year's draft. That I think that would have maximized that. I think the odds are going to be the same of him making the team no matter when he went out, honestly.
Well, I get that, and one thing we were gonna catch up on is Judkins. Do you think Judkins played any decision in him leaving early? I mean, that's a pretty wild question to have to ask. But I mean, if I'm sitting there, if I'm Zach Evans, and the Rock got shared very well last year, I thought, but that's got to play a little bit in your mind of how well he did. Judkins did last year for Ole Miss. I mean, does that play a factor in your decision to go pro?
I don't think so, because having Judkins being the workhorse of the team means that Zach Evans, if he'd have came back to Ole Miss, would only have like 130 carries over the course of a season. A little bit more than he had last year, potentially, maybe 150. Either way, it's not going to knock a lot of tread off the tire, so to speak, that they're worried about. And then you can prove that you can make it through a whole season healthy. You can go through the combine, which he was going to absolutely nail. I think Judkins being at Ole Miss would have actually helped Zach Evans. But I think that a little bit about this, and I mentioned this on yesterday's podcast, I think it was, that you start recruiting these kids and as a sophomore in high school, and your recruiting pitch is, hey, you come to my place, in 3 years you go to the NFL. In 3 years, you go to the NFL. Till it becomes in their mind that if you don't go to the NFL in 3 years, you're a failure. And you didn't do what was planned to do. And I just think we need to change our way of thinking a little bit about that.
Yep, I love listening to the Brad and Chad show too. They talk recruiting, and Bradley Sowell always says, "Guys, I just don't understand why everybody feels like year 3 you automatically have to turn pro." He goes, "I saw so many talented people in the NFL just not make it, and an extra year of college would have just done so much better for so many people, and it's tough to see." And running back's a tough position to make it in the NFL too. Not a long lifespan for running back, and paying is great, but God bless him, and I hope he goes and balls out. That's all I can say.
Yeah, you got to, and honestly, you just have people in their ear, and everybody's trying to push this kid to make him go one direction, and there's nobody telling them to stay put. There's nobody that will tell them the truth, because everybody is trying to end up being in the entourage whenever they make it, but nobody is actually telling the kid the truth, and that can hurt some players. But let's change the subject and talk about Quinshon for a second. And my thing is, how good do you think Quinshon is? Because in my opinion, only Blake Corum can have a legit argument as being as good as him. I think he's the best running back in the country because Corum's coming off of an injury. But I honestly believe he is the best back in the country.
Would you already say that Quinshon is potentially the best back in Ole Miss history, having played one season only?
Well, think about this. If he has the same season he had last year, he is the all-time rushing leader in Ole Miss history.
That's pretty hard to believe.
Yeah,
that's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. That's almost impossible to believe. And I mean, I would be interested to know, if he just tacked on, what do you know exactly what the number is for the all-time rushing record? Is it,
something like
3,200 yards?
Yeah, it's like 3,200 yards. Quinshon was almost halfway exactly to the record after his freshman year. So it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, you could probably at least make a case for it. I think that would be a pretty hard stretch. But, I mean, I feel like Ole Miss has these, right on the borderline 1,000-yard rushers every 4 or 5 seasons, something like that, I feel like. And that's a great season for an Ole Miss running back. And, I mean, you build a career in the NFL doing that in college in the SEC West. And so when Quinshon can go and just do what he's been doing, I mean, there's no ceiling for a guy like that.
Well, if you think about it, and not many people know this, but Ole Miss is one of the few schools in the country that never ran the wishbone. I mean, they might line up on plays and do it, but as an offensive system, they never really did it. And that is because Johnny Vaught, whenever he was at Ole Miss, ran a very unique offense. It was very quarterback-centric, all the way back to Jake Gibbs in 1959 and Archie Manning. And then in the 70s, when everybody went to this wishbone system, Ole Miss didn't really do it because Johnny Vaught at that point was the athletic director. So we kind of missed that fad. So when the 80s became the power I and the I formation, we kind of missed a step in between there. So offensively, we didn't develop the same way that, say, they did down in Starkville. So because of that, the running game wasn't at the same level. So you had K.O. Dotley, who had the rushing record for 70 years. And I think it was set in like 1949 or 1952 or something like that. And Quinshon, that's who Quinshon broke the record. And, up until just a couple of years ago, a 1,000-yard season was not common at all. In fact, I think it may have never happened other than K.O. Dotley before like 1997. And then Deuce McAllister and Joe Gunn went on his run, which, by the way, in 1997 and 1998, the two running backs on that team, the first and second leading rusher all time in Ole Miss football history.
I did not know that. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, Deuce McAllister and Joe Gunn, 1 and 2.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean that's one of the reasons that we have been so quarterback centric over the years is because of what Johnny Vaught did back in the 50s and 60s, and then that carrying that through the 70s when everybody else was in the wishbone phase and this wishbone craze that was going through everybody kind of missed us because Johnny Vaught was very quarterback centric. He wanted quarterbacks that could throw the football a little bit.
Well, it makes sense, and look, I'm excited for Judkins. I think his NIL deal, he deserves every penny and more. I think everybody in Oxford feels the exact same way. So, yeah, I mean, I hope that he goes and just shreds every record that we've ever had. So he seems like a great guy. He seems like a great kid. Seems hardworking. Keeps his nose out of trouble. I mean, that's just really all you can ask for in a college athlete.
Yeah, Ole Miss fans also need to realize this simple fact that is going on. And that is that if Quinshon Judkins rushes for 1,200 yards, just 1,200 yards, maybe 14 touchdowns, this season is not a failure for him. If he rushes for less yards and the rest of the offense is more effective, that's a win that Quinshon caused. So can't go completely by the numbers with Quinshon, in my opinion.
And I don't think anybody is actually expecting Quinshon to go run for 1,600 yards this year. I mean, I just don't. I mean, at least I'm not. I think he has the potential to go do it. But, look, I think Zach Evans taking off some of that load a little bit last year helped him. I think that I just think that there's a lot that goes into doing that. You got to hit a lot of things right. And I'd see Quinshon probably rushing for 1,100 yards this year, and that's an exceptional season. And you know what? We're going to be a darn good football team if he can rush for 1,100 yards this year. So anyway, yeah, I think that it could be a great year for him. And but do I have the expectation he goes runs for 1,600 this year? Absolutely not.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first and listen every day. Every day or tomorrow on the show, or sometime on the show this week, we're going to talk to Derek Vandegrift. I don't know if it's tomorrow or the next day, but he's going to talk about the series victory. Ole Miss going past the Georgia Bulldogs. They're getting ready for the Missouri Tigers. Alabama Crimson Tide and Auburn Tigers, as well as Ole Miss pushes towards Hoover. So every dayers tune in for that. Anyway, Pratt, thank you very much for stopping by today, man, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, buddy. See ya.
All right, bye.